In the heart of the Nevada desert, where survival is brutal and the rules of nature are written in blood, one moment changed everything. An old lone wolf, wandering toward the end of his days, stumbled upon a dying foal, alone, helpless, barely breathing beside her lifeless mother. He should have walked away, or worse, but what he did instead would shock wildlife experts, rescue teams, and the world. This is the story of a predator who became a protector, and a filly who refused to die. Stay with us because what happens next defies every law of nature. Before we continue, we request you to please subscribe to Chronicles of Wild for more unbelievable, real-life stories of the bonds between animals and the people who care enough to notice. In the vast wilderness of Nevada, where the wind whispers through dry grass and silence rules the land, an old gray wolf moved slowly across the desert. His name was Shadow. Once a proud leader of his pack, Shadow was now alone, old, tired, and fading. He had outlived his pack, his strength, and his purpose. Each day, he wandered the empty terrain with a limp in his step and a storm in his eyes. But one afternoon, something changed. On the wind he heard a sound. Not a howl, not the call of prey, but a faint, broken whinny. Curious, he followed it, step by step, down into a rocky ravine, and there he saw her, a young Mustang foal, no older than a few days, collapsed beside her mother, who lay still and lifeless in the dirt. The foal was trembling, weak from hunger, barely breathing. Shadow watched her. This was the law of the wild. Predator, a helpless prey. And yet he didn't attack. Instead, he approached slowly, sniffed the air, lowered his head, and lay down a few feet away. All night he stayed near her, watching, guarding, saying nothing. When the sun rose again, they were still there, an old wolf and a dying foal, side by side in silence. Later that morning, a wildlife drone captured the strange image. It was sent to a nearby rescue team who didn't believe what they were seeing. But when they arrived, the story was real. The foal was alive. The wolf had protected her. And somehow, they had found comfort in each other's presence. That day, they were both taken in, rescued from the desert. But what no one realized yet was that this was only the beginning of something far more extraordinary. As the first rays of sunlight spilled over the Nevada hills, the filly stirred. She was still weak, her breath shallow. But something had changed. Presence warm, near. Not the desert wind. Not the buzzards who'd been circling since yesterday. She turned her head slightly, and there he was, a gray wolf, old, slow-moving, his ribs slightly visible beneath his fur. But his amber eyes held no hunger, no threat, just a quiet watchfulness. The filly blinked, confused. Her instincts whispered fear, but her body was too weak to run, and strangely, her heart didn't panic. The old wolf didn't come closer. He sat down a short distance away, ears twitching, nose lifted slightly toward her, and he simply watched. Hour after hour, he didn't move when the sun blazed high overhead, didn't flinch when a hawk screamed from above, and when the filly drifted into restless sleep, he stayed alert, unmoving, like a sentinel. That evening the wind picked up, the desert turned sharp with cold. The filly shivered in her sleep, legs twitching. She whimpered softly. That's when the old wolf finally rose. Not to hunt, not to feed. He stepped forward, slow, careful, and curled beside her. Not touching, just close enough to share warmth. She flinched at first, but he didn't move. Minutes passed. Then, with a sigh, She relaxed again, her small body easing into the sand. From a distance, they looked like a strange mirage. Predator and prey side by side, bathed in the pale glow of the moon. When morning came, the filly stood up, shaky, uncertain, but standing. She took one step, then two, then crumpled. The wolf stood too, watching. Then he walked ahead, turned, and looked back at her. She didn't follow. He returned, sat beside her again, waited. It wasn't the behavior of a hunter. It was something else. Something no one would have believed, had they not seen it themselves. And someone did see it. 2 miles away, wildlife ranger Jessica Marin was scanning the horizon. She'd been sent out to locate a tagged Mustang herd that hadn't moved in over a week. Drought and fencing had changed migration routes, and some young horses had strayed too far. She had no idea she was about to stumble onto something that would change her life and challenge everything she thought she knew about the wild. She spotted the filly first, a reddish blur against the rocky sand, and nearby a wolf. Her heart jumped. She reached for her tranquilizer rifle out of instinct. But then she paused. What she saw wasn't a kill. It was companionship. The old wolf stood protectively, his eyes meeting hers from across the field. And then something even more startling. The filly stepped forward, toward him, not away. Jessica lowered her rifle. She reached for her camera instead. That image, a wild horse and an old wolf standing side by side under the desert sun, would go on to capture hearts around the world. But in that moment, it was just the beginning. Jessica knelt slowly, careful not to make sudden movements. Her camera dangled forgotten around her neck. She was no longer the observer. She was part of something sacred. The old wolf didn't snarl, didn't flee. He just stood there calm, unafraid. And behind him, the filly blinked at Jessica. Wobbly, thin, but alive. Jessica took a step forward. The filly's ears flicked. The wolf didn't move. Another step. Still no fear. Jessica whispered softly. Words didn't matter. Tone did. The filly took a hesitant step toward her. Jessica saw it then, the injuries. Sunburned lips, chapped legs, dehydration. If she didn't act soon, this foal wouldn't survive another night. But moving closer meant risking the delicate trust in front of her. So Jessica made a choice. She sat down, cross-legged, on the ground, and waited. Minutes passed, then an hour. The wolf lay down again, eyes always on Jessica. The filly sniffed the air. Finally, she stepped toward the ranger. Just 3 paces, then stopped. It was enough. Jessica whispered into her radio. Location found. I've got the filly. And you're not gonna believe who's guarding her. Help arrived just before sunset. 2 more rangers with a trailer and medical supplies. But the moment they stepped into view, the wolf rose. He placed himself between the humans and the horse. No growling, no lunging, just defiance. As if to say, if you want her, you go through me. Jessica raised a hand to stop her team. He's not the threat, she said. He's been her shield. Then, she stepped forward again, kneeling beside the filly, whispering reassurances, stroking her mane. Took time, gentle coaxing, but finally the filly allowed herself to be led. And the wolf? He followed, silently, step for step. Not a prisoner, not a pet, a guardian. The filly was stabilized. For fluids, nutrients, rest. Jessica named her spirit, for her will to survive, and for the way she brought life back into others. But the wolf, he was harder to place. He refused food, wouldn't settle, his eyes always on the gate, waiting, until one morning, Jessica brought Spirit to the fenced outdoor paddock. The wolf lifted his head. He approached the fence, and for the first time he wagged his tail, not like a dog, like a tired old soldier recognizing home. They kept him close after that. A separate enclosure, but nearby. Spirit would watch him. He would watch her. And slowly, something incredible unfolded. The wolf, now named Shadow, began to heal too. Not just his body, his spirit. Jessica sat by the paddock one evening, watching them from a distance. Two creatures that nature never meant to be friends, bound by something no textbook could explain. "I think," she whispered, "they saved each other." Weeks passed. Spring gave way to the heat of early summer, and both Shadow and Spirit grew stronger. Spirit gained weight. Her coat darkened to a rich, chestnut shine. She started kicking up dust in her paddock, testing her legs. And Shadow, he limped a little less each day. His coat filled in. His appetite returned. But something else was changing, too. They were growing closer. Not in the way people expect. They didn't play. They didn't cuddle. But every morning, Shadow would walk to the edge of his enclosure, and Spirit would meet him on the other side. They'd stand there, still, silent, two silhouettes at sunrise. And then Jessica got the call. "The foal's recovered," said Dr. Rodriguez. "She's strong enough for reintegration." Jessica nodded slowly. "That's good news." But her voice didn't sound happy. "And Shadow?" she asked. There was a long pause. The room shifted. "He's old," said another biologist. "Too old for the wild, and too socialized to humans now." Jessica clenched her jaw. "Are you recommending euthanasia?" "No one's recommending anything yet," someone else replied carefully. "But the question is on the table." Jessica didn't sleep that night. She sat in her office watching old footage of Spirit and Shadow, their first meeting, their silent companionship, and she began to write. Proposal. An idea no one had tried before. A sanctuary, not a zoo, not a cage, but a shared space for animals like Shadow and Spirit, caught between two worlds, too wild for captivity, too changed for the wild. Jessica stood in front of a board of directors, wildlife experts, donors, vets. She clicked through photos, shared data. Then she said, "This is more than survival. It's about honoring the bond we witnessed and learning from it." She showed video of Shadow pacing the fence until Spirit returned from vet checkups. Footage of Spirit whinnying the moment she saw him. "This wasn't a fluke," Jessica continued. "It was a choice, one made over and over again." The board didn't speak for a long time. Then slowly, heads began to nod, and the vote passed. The sanctuary would be built. Not a final solution, but a new beginning. Jessica walked to the enclosure that evening. Shadow was there, waiting. She knelt down by the fence. "We did it, old man," she whispered. "It's not everything, but it's enough." Shadow looked at her, those amber eyes, ancient and wise. And just for a moment, she swore. He smiled. The sanctuary took months to build. Nestled in a quiet valley just beyond the Nevada ridge. It wasn't large. But it didn't need to be. It needed to feel safe, open, free, but with fences that protected instead of confined. Jessica worked alongside builders, volunteers, and other rangers, but she visited Spirit and Shadow every evening, even after long, dusty days of labor. And slowly the dream took shape, rolling enclosures with native grass, shaded alcoves built into the rocks. Fresh water from nearby springs piped in naturally. And no cages. No walls that couldn't be seen through. Jessica planting wildflowers. A teen volunteer painting the sanctuary's name on a wooden sign. The Hollow Haven. And Shadow watching quietly from the edge of his current pen, as though he already knew it was meant for them. The day came when Spirit was finally released into her new home. She hesitated at the gate. The air smelled different, greener, alive, but not wild like before. Jessica stood beside her, one hand on the gate latch, the other on Spirit's withers. "Ready?" she whispered. The filly didn't answer, of course, but she stepped forward. The gate swung open. Spirit trotted out, wobbly but determined. Her tail flicked, her head lifted, and then, from the other side of the enclosure, Shadow appeared. The old wolf didn't run, didn't bark. He just moved toward her. Slow, steady, sure. And they met at the center, shoulder to shoulder. No sound, just presence. Two lives once lost, now walking forward together, free. The sanctuary wasn't built for crowds, but stories. They travel faster than footsteps. Soon visitors began to come. Students, photographers, veterinarians curious about the bond. A war veteran who hadn't spoken in a year, until he stood at the fence and whispered, "Thank you," to Shadow. Jessica never advertised the story. She didn't need to. Spirit and Shadow had become symbols of endurance, of choice, of a world still full of wonder. And the sanctuary began to grow. Years passed. Spirit grew into a strong, fierce mare. She became a protector in her own right, nurturing a few rescued foals as they arrived. And Shadow, he aged with grace. His limp returned in the cold. His muzzle turned white. But his eyes, they never dulled. One autumn evening, Jessica found him lying under the oldest cottonwood tree in the sanctuary. Spirit stood nearby, not pacing, just watching, silent. Shadow looked up at Jessica, and she knew. No pain, no fear, just peace. He had given all he had. And finally, he closed his eyes. They buried him beneath that tree, with wild sage growing at its base. Jessica placed a simple stone marker. Shadow, a guardian of the wild. Spirit stayed by the grave for 2 days. She didn't eat, didn't play, but she wasn't broken, because he hadn't left her empty. He had filled her life with something the desert couldn't steal. Connection, memory, a reason to trust again. One morning, a new ranger spotted Spirit at the far end of the sanctuary, standing beside a newly rescued foal. The baby was barely walking, orphaned, shaking, and Spirit, strong, still silent, stood beside her, not touching, just near, watching, guarding, just like he once did. And the circle began again. Two souls who should never have met became each other's reason to live. In a world that so often shows us the harshness of nature, Shadow and Spirit remind us there's still room for miracles. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it, because the more people who see it, the more hearts it can heal. Subscribe to Chronicles of Wild for more unbelievable, real-life stories of the bonds between animals and the people who care enough to notice. Shadow and Spirit's story doesn't end here, and neither will ours.